With the Republicans now officially winning Congress, that's what I've heard from a lot of these news reports that they're going to win it narrowly. They haven't determined by the margin yet, I believe, that they're going to win it by, but it's for certain now that they're going to win Congress. So now I just want to talk about just the midterms, how they went, just a analysis of what went down. There was a lot of hype coming into this midterm election that Republicans were going to dominate. They were going to have this great red wave that was going to give them huge majorities in both the Senate and Congress. Obviously, that didn't materialize. As you can see, they didn't win the Senate. Now it's official. The Democrats have 50 Senate seats. They're still competing for the Georgia seat, which is going to be a runoff. If they win that, they'll give them 51. So either way, they got a majority. Even if it's 50-50, they can break away Kamala like they've been doing before. Obviously, they would like to get the 51. Republicans, they have won the House. I don't know by the margin they won it by, but it's a pretty narrow margin. So they didn't get what they had hoped. Obviously, they have a consolation prize again in the House, but I'm sure they wanted bigger majorities. One thing I want to disclose before I go into further detail, I'm not a Democrat or Republican. I think both parties are corrupt and they're controlled by the elites. So that's how I feel about it. But I just want to dive in right now and just examine what caused the Republicans not to have this great red wave like they had hoped that it would happen. One of the things that caused this would be the Democrats, believe it or not, in the sense that the Democrats had funded these radical Trump Republicans in the primaries for a lot of these positions, especially in Congress and in the Senate, that they were funding them through dark money, making sure that they win their primaries. And they were doing it through super PACs. They were giving them actually donations because the Democrats had made a gamble in the sense that they felt that if these radical Trumpers were the nominee for the Republicans, that they would lose in a general election against any Democratic candidate that ran against them. And they were right for the most part. I think the majority's Trumpers lost. Very few won, if any. The only guy I could think of that was openly a radical Trumper that won was J.D. Vance in Ohio. I can't think of any others from the top of my head. So basically, it was an onslaught. If you were an extremist Trump Republican, you probably lost. I think there was one race in the state of Washington where the Democratic challenger for Congress had like a 2% chance of winning. And they still managed to win because the person they were running against was a extreme Trumper. So you can't count out that factor. A lot of people just don't like Trump or his extremeness, and that stench carries over to these candidates that express their agreement with Trump and his belief system. So that was huge, I think, in causing them to lose. That was one of the reasons. Also, just like I mentioned, the candidates Trump endorsed, that was kind of like the seal of crap for the majority of them. The only guy that benefited from this was J.D. Vance. So he was the only guy who benefited really from Trump's endorsement. The other thing that was really big was the abortion issue. That was huge. That was a huge issue. I didn't think the Republicans believed that it was going to factor in. I know the Dems did believe it was going to factor in coming to this midterm, and it did. I think there were results that showed that polls that showed that single women voted in a huge margin for the Democrats. It was like a 30 or 40 point margin in which they voted for. So that was huge. Just that was kind of like a gift to the Democrats, a Supreme Court ruling to get rid of abortion. That was a huge swing for them. That cost them to get a lot of these seats that they probably normally wouldn't have gotten. These gains, I would say, especially in the Senate, that normally they wouldn't have gotten. So that was huge for them. The other thing I think that was big for the Democrats was obviously Generation Z turning up for this election, and young millennials who are still in their 20s, early 30s, in that range, turning up for this election. The combination of those groups killed the Republicans in the polls. I think in this group that this demographic, the Republicans lost it by like a ridiculous margin, something like I think 20 to 40 points in that range. So they got destroyed by that group, that demographic, and the abortion issue. So that was huge in taking them out. So all those played a role in it. I know the Democrats like to believe that this is a referendum on Biden, that he's actually a good president, but I don't think it was really Biden that this was a referendum on. This is really a referendum on by the American people, that they don't agree with a lot of this extremism that the Republican Party is trying to push right now, whether it's abortion or just the stuff that these Trumpers espouse. So that's what I think that really was. It wasn't a reflection of the American people believing in Biden, I would say. I think that we will know how the American people feel about Biden within 2 years, but I don't think that was the case. Um, the other thing I would say is, going forward, if you're the Republicans, you want to run these candidates that are quote unquote moderates. I say quote unquote moderates because I don't really believe in anything. Believe in the term moderate. I just believe moderate is just a term for Republicans that are not open about the social issues, whether it's abortion, illegal immigration, issues about race, the quote unquote Black Lives Matters, that they tend to be quiet about those issues. They don't try to talk about it. They just try to stick to these generic issues like, hey, a little smaller government, more freedom, that type of garbage. That they're kind of low key. So, but they still believe in all the same economic issues that the Republican candidates in general believe in, which is just low taxes, deregulation of corporations, corporation rights over regular people rights, et cetera, et cetera. So moderates are the way to go, I would say, because they tend to be quiet on the social issues, even though they probably believe the same stuff Trump does, but they don't openly espouse it. So I think that's the way to go if you're Republicans. You want to get a lot of these boring, generic Republican candidates that are not polarizing. Like I look at North Carolina with Ted Budd. This guy was very quiet. I live in North Carolina, so I saw a lot of his commercial ads, but I hardly ever heard him talk or speak. So that definitely helped him, I feel, here. Just he came across as this like low key guy, and that was a huge reason why he won. Granted, the candidate he ran against was pretty crappy, but still, I think that's the way the Republicans, if they're smart, that's the way that they would go in 2024. Run these types of candidates that are just not willing to talk about these social issues, and then you have a higher chance of winning the Senate and the Congress. So that's what they should do if they're intelligent, but we'll see if they go that route. That's the way I look at it. And the Republicans should be concerned going forward. They were not able to win the House by a big majority, despite it being a midterm. Midterms are always favorable to the opposing party that's not in power. So, and they failed to capitalize on that. They also had to feel embarrassed that it was in their favor in the sense because the majority of places in the U.S. are gerrymandered to favor them, and they still couldn't really convert on that. So that's pretty embarrassing. If they lose in 2024, not just the presidency, but the House and Senate, I think it's going to be very soul crushing for the Republicans, and it's going to put them in disarray. That's the way I look at it. It'll be interesting to see going forward how this goes. I would also say about the millennials and Gen Z turnout, the Dems should keep exercising that, to be honest. Biden should try to push in more reforms for younger people. Granted, he's not going to get nothing done, but if he was smart, he should make that play, like trying to issue more executive orders, whether it's on student loan forgiveness or something else that benefits millennials and Gen Z. If he does that, he can galvanize them to go to the polls, and that can help him win re-election. That's what he should be doing the next 2 years, just focusing hard on that stuff. And that'll give him probably the best chance to win, I feel. So it will be interesting to see how both of these parties adjust in the next 2 years and what their strategies are going to be going into 2024. And we'll see what happens.